Now before I kickstart this video, I would first like to give a shout out to Accursed Farms, a content creator that I've grown a massive amount of respect for after he launched a campaign to try to get legislators to investigate the issue that we've been experiencing recently of gaming companies actively taking away your ownership of games and having the power to take away your experience by shutting down their servers and rendering their games that often rely on online connections to be completely unplayable. I would seriously implore you to visit stopkillinggames.com and take as much action as you can, especially if you're someone who once purchased the game The Crew. In fact, this little shout out will actually become more relevant to this video than you might think, as you'll soon understand why. Now recently Storm Connections has gone through a fair amount of changes since the first time I reviewed it. In fact, the latest balance patch was a pretty extensive one, admittedly pretty impressive one considering the large cast of characters that it has and how much of a nightmare it must be to balance the entire roster. Plus, while I wouldn't be able to tell you if the netcode improved since I don't play the game, in case that's not already obvious given my previous stances, I am aware that it now has custom matchmaking, which not exactly something worth celebrating considering that this is a pretty basic feature in literally every fighting game out there, but I know there are people who play this game, as small as the player base might be even compared to Storm 4, and if their online experience is improving, I'm happy for them. Now personally, I can acknowledge the improvements, but so far, nothing has really convinced me to get back to this game. Not that I necessarily even expected that to happen. I've said this before, I'm more of an offline player. I don't really dick around in online lobbies. I don't have time, mental fortitude, and sense of sportsmanship to grind in ranked matches. It's just not really my thing. But even then, I still wouldn't consider this game to be at a state that I would deem as respectable or recommendable. In fact, to be honest with you, some of the balance changes I actually don't even agree with. Like really, decreasing the substitution recovery period, now that the combo window is even lower, I feel even less incentivized to practice combo, which is honestly the only reason you'll ever see me boot up this game. Like, won't lie, this combo here from Sasuke where I switch positions in order to grab the opponent, that's the level of creativity that I admittedly love about this game, despite my issues. However, at the end of the day, I still mostly see this as nothing more than a glorified Storm 4 mod pack sold at a full price. But there actually is something that would make me change my opinion on the game. Now, at this point, I've pretty much accepted the fact that I'm no longer CyberConnect 2's target audience, evident by the fact that their open world has been progressively getting worse. Trust me, I know, I've been playing the PS2 Ultimate Ninja games on my Steam Deck, and that was a time period when they were actually striving to improve their open world. Not at all the case anymore, and you know what? Whatever, I get it, it's a fighting game. They care more about making this a live service than innovating their single player campaign. But to be honest, if they release some kind of story DLC and don't make the same mistakes that they made with this game, where they wasted time with uninteresting matches that are no better than just running them on free battle, if they brought something of the same polish that they offered with Hinokami Chronicles, which I made a video a while back explaining why I actually think their story adaptation of Demon Slayer is probably their best anime-based single-player work that they've done. If they offer something based on Boruto material, which let's be real, that's what we ultimately wanted anyway, that would pique my interest. Because right now, I haven't bought any of the character DLCs, I just don't care, I'm not gonna play this game in the state that it currently is, but a story DLC? Now we're getting somewhere. But if they were to do this, it would have to be under one very strict condition. At some point in the future, they have to re-release this game as an Ultimate Edition, similarly to how they did with Storm 4 Road to Boruto. You know, nowadays, Storm 4 is actually pretty good value, but it wasn't always the case. If you were there during the launch of this game, you would know that Storm 4 did not have a very good start. It had its own behemoth of problems, but over time, it got patched, it got new content, and eventually in 2017, they re-released the game in different bundles. One of them was the Legacy Edition, and the other one was Storm 4 Road to Boruto, which included all the DLC/expansions that they had released up until that point. Now, this practice isn't very common anymore, and I'm sure there are some people that don't even think it's worth doing that, especially if you're in a position where you already own all the DLC content by the time the Ultimate Edition comes out, but I believe they should do this for two main reasons. Number one, this game currently has a pretty terrible reputation. As of me writing this video, this game still has less active players than Storm 4, and it's still a very freshly released game. In my opinion, I think they should release an Ultimate Edition, maybe even include some exclusive content if they want to artificially mark up its value, and they probably shouldn't release it at full price. Now, I know they would, which I think is fucking stupid, but even then, I would be willing to look past that if they lowered the price of the base game to $20, which is honestly what I think the game should have cost given how bare bones it is. But there's another reason that is very personal to me, and it's actually partially why I haven't bought any of the character DLCs. You see, one of the biggest problems that I have with in-game / downloadable content is that they're not content that you technically own. You see, recently Nintendo shut down their online services for their 3DS and Wii U. Now, that alone isn't necessarily what upsets me. I understand that online services are not endlessly sustainable. They're going to get shut down eventually. From a business and even environmental viewpoint, it's not practical to keep wasting resources maintaining the data centers that run online services that's no longer profitable and only a negligible amount of people even use it on a regular basis. That I completely understand. But what bothers me deeply in my heart is when Nintendo promises that DLC content will remain downloadable. Meanwhile, there are already reports of people having trouble re-downloading their purchased DLC for Smash Bros. This is what I genuinely despise about the current online-based digital world. You see, if I buy Hagoromo, I'm buying a digital key that is tied to my PlayStation account. And because obtaining this requires downloading from their servers, as well as authenticating my account in order to validate my ownership of the game, that means that the ability for me to access this DLC is entirely reliant on Sony, on Bandai Namco continuing to maintain their services, and my only question is, to what extent? What happens if somewhere down the line you decide that you don't want to continue supporting this game? What happens if you decide to ban my account because you don't fucking like me? So what? The thing that I paid money for is no longer accessible to me? How is that reasonable in any way whatsoever? Like, I would be more than happy if CyberConnect 2 truly did release a proper story DLC, the same way they've been doing with DBZ Kakarot. But I also think they should release an Ultimate Edition that includes all their DLC without any download, in my opinion at least. Maybe not everyone would buy it, but I definitely would. And I think that if they're able to promote it correctly, as well as include enough content that justifies them pretty much asking people to purchase the game again, it may even pay off commercially. Because here's the thing, I don't believe Storm 5 is coming. And even if it did, I don't have much trust in CyberConnect 2 as I did before Storm Connections got released, so my expectations would be at an all-time low. But as far as providing long-time support for Storm Connections, I can kinda see that happening, but that's something that we would have to wait and see. At least as of right now, I still think Storm Connections is at a pretty lackluster state, and I've seen games that launch at a better state that died off pretty quickly. So if you ask me, my current prediction is that at some point, Bandai Namco isn't going to see this as commercially viable, and it's just gonna kill off support for it, and there's no one else to blame here other than themselves. But if for whatever reason they want to double down on this game, all I can say is that I'm not gonna be against that, and I'm very interested in seeing if there will be a redemption arc at the end of the tunnel, though my hopes are not very high. Anyway, I think that's all I have to share. Once again, please visit the site stopkillinggames.com if you really care about consumer ownership, and other than that, hope you're doing well.